Welcome, everyone. Our nice intimate core group is here. Kate and Shu Chen and Ellen and Brian and Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie. And Mira and Frank, who is joining us from the mountains of the Blue Ridge Mountains, it looks like.
Hungry Mother State Park, just while I'm eating.
I love the screens. I tried to pull up my Russian steppe, the Russian Siberian steppe, but it doesn't work for some reason technologically. Hello, MP88YK.
I have Esther there.
Esther, hey. I never would have guessed that.
I know that email address well.
Neither would I. Neither would I.
Ooh, this is the Palazzo. Where are we today?
We are in Madrid. This is the Puerta del Sol. That's right downtown. And today is the fiesta in Madrid. It's called San Isidro, and it's a very popular festival. So I've been listening to Madrileño music. That's why I'm late, because I've been texting a lot.
Oh, today is actually a holiday.
Today is a holiday, but people cannot leave their houses yet. Only in specific times of the day for different ages, and just to exercise. So there has been a lot of music shared from the balconies and really cool stuff. People are celebrating in spite of the confinement.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We'll probably be joined by a few more people. But welcome everyone to the last of our bi-weekly Zoom sessions, Transitioning Community Engaged Courses Online. This is the last of 4. And I'm Andy Kaufman. I think everyone here knows me by now. And I'm joined by our 2 regular facilitators, Ellen Blackman and Bonnie Gordon. And today we have a guest facilitator, Mira Waller, who has joined us and has generously offered to facilitate a conversation about how community engaged faculty can humanize online learning. And in a sense, this is a perfect coda to our 4 sessions, because this theme has really been a subtext of all of our sessions. The whole rationale behind a special group of community engaged faculty having these conversations is that relationships and the human dimension are really important to what we do. And this can be particularly challenging in an online environment. So in some sense, everything that we've been talking about is related to that. And so what Mira is going to do today will be a perfect coda to our work. I also want to mention, I mentioned this last time, what I love about a learning community is the community aspect, and the fact that Rose had something that she helped facilitate on last time, Rose Cole from Madison House, and today it's Mira Waller. I'd like to resume these in the fall, and I'd love to invite any of you who have a particular topic that you would be excited to facilitate a conversation around, to let us know by all means, and I'd like to incorporate that. And what I'm thinking about doing in the fall is doing something not every 2 weeks, but maybe every 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm thinking of dividing the sessions into 2 parts. One is maybe a little bit longer than 60 minutes, maybe 75 minutes long. And the first part will be a discussion about a short article or a short reading about e-service learning, about something that's really relevant to what we're going through right now. And then I also would like to each time to invite those of you who are teaching courses or did over the summer or are teaching in the fall community engaged courses online to share, maybe each session will have one person share their work in progress, and any challenges or questions that you're facing that we can workshop as a group. So I think it will be really useful for people to hear in real time how people's experiences are going. And then to kind of do it as a workshop model or a master class type type model. But anyway, that's what I'm envisioning for the fall. I'm actually going to be gone for this July and August. I'm working on a book, so I'm going to be completely out of the loop. But in September, I'd love to resume these. And I'll be in touch with those of you, or you can be in touch with me if you're teaching this summer or in the fall, community engaged course. It'd be great to have you as part of those sessions, part of that conversation. And of course, please come anyway, even if you're not teaching. Before I turn over to Mira, I'd like to invite Ellen to share some really interesting information that she received the past couple of days and about her talks with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence.
Thanks, Andy. So thanks for giving me this little platform. I really just wanted to share about a conference call that I was on with 100 of my closest friends of the CNE reporting out on a recent needs survey that they conducted amongst their, not just their partner organizations, but nonprofits in the Albemarle, Charlottesville area. And this was a needs survey that was begun during the COVID crisis. This is trying to assess needs as of the last several months. And so I'm going to share a link to a infographic that captures some of the bigger pieces of data from that needs survey. It won't be surprising to see some of that information. Local nonprofits are hitting a budget shortfall, and it's coming from several angles. It's decreased. They anticipate decreased philanthropic giving. A lot of organizations have had to cancel any revenue generating programming that they had scheduled. Many organizations are seeing increased demand on their services at this time. Volunteer rates, I'm not sure what the sort of granular data on that is, but a lot of these places rely on volunteers who are retired and can't actually safely volunteer anymore. So the volunteer forces are definitely fluctuating right now. So the data that you'll see, and if you scroll to the bottom of that infographic, you'll actually see that there's a button you can hit for full survey results, and you get a lot more information there. So the data you see, like I said, isn't terribly surprising, and it's pretty grim, to be honest. But one of the things that happened during this conference call that just kind of stuck with me, and so again, Andy, thank you for letting me just kind of, prattle on here. But one of the panelists was Michael McKee, who's the CEO of the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank. And he said, with a tone of totally justifiable exasperation at some point, at what point does it stop making sense to operate the way that we do at this turbo capacity, volunteers absolutely drained, resources drained? And at what point, does it make more sense to instead expand SNAP benefits so that people can actually just go to the grocery store and get what they need? So it was just sort of crystallized to me this other way that individuals can become involved with these nonprofits. If it's not through direct volunteering, there is still that advocacy piece that these nonprofits call for. And Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, I'm just using them as an example. If you go to their website, they do have a section where they invite interested people to advocate on their behalf and to call representatives and to read up on policies that will affect their mission and their clientele. So I'm not sitting here saying this is how you should redirect any future engagement courses, but rather maybe it's something just to consider individually at first and see what's out there and see if any organizations have sort of put those other kinds of calls out. Like I said, just kind of stuck with me, so I wanted to share. So thank you, Andy. Not a font of information here, just wanted to share.
Yeah, and it's very apropos of our conversations as we're thinking about what can we as community engaged faculty do in this particular moment to respond to the needs of this moment. And so it might, it got me thinking even about Books Behind Bars. Are there ways that I could include more of an advocacy component to the class rather than just the literature and the discussion and the relationships? And in fact, the students did that themselves. Students voluntarily created a video this semester that they shared really advocating for the needs of the incarcerated youth who were infected by COVID and were still at the facility, and they wanted to raise people's awareness about that. And that's something that's never been a part of my course before. But so what I like about what you shared, Ellen, is it really gives us an opportunity to expand our thinking about what we could do in terms of community engagement in this moment that maybe is different from what we've done in the past. So thank you. Awesome. So let's turn it over to the star of today's session, well, the facilitator. Star, I don't mean to call you a star. Not that that's an insult, but so Mira Waller, thank you for, I'm really grateful that you're offering to do this, and thank you for joining us. Could you just let people know about who you are and what you do, and then take it from there?
Sure. First, I want to thank all of you for welcoming me in to this community. And I also have been in a couple of the sessions, just sort of lurking. And I feel that a lot of what I will be talking about, really, you all have already touched on and have been talking about. It's more of a extended opportunity to think about how to put the expertise and the experiences we've been sharing in these sessions together and think about things for the fall and for the last summer session. So a little bit about myself, and let me know if you can't hear me. A little bit about myself. I'm the Associate University Librarian for Research and Learning Services here at UVA. And funny enough, I started on March 30th. So all of my introduction to UVA and to the community here has been virtual. And so it has been an experience for me. I think it's been overall very good, but as you all know, it's definitely a difficult thing to engage and to become a part of the community when you cannot have any face-to-face interactions. So I will be pulling on that experience as well as we facilitate through this session. I currently at UVA oversee a division in the libraries that is made up of all the liaisons, so all the subject specialist librarians that interact with different departments, schools, units, institutes, colleges. I also have a research data services unit in my division. Basically anything that is forward facing. So all the spaces, all the people who interact with folks in those spaces are in my division. And I also have teaching and learning in my division. So we have some instructional designers in the library. And so what I'm really drawing on is experiences and skills around looking at developing things specifically for different learning environments. In my past life, before I came to UVA, what seems like years ago, but has only been a few months, I was at NC State University and I focused on research, so research engagement. And before that, I was directing and managing an online community for publishing mathematics and statistics that was jointly run by Duke University Press and Cornell University Library. And the reason why I'm really in support of and wanting to support community engaged teaching and advocacy here at UVA is because that's actually a passion of mine. And it's something that I think is really, really important. I think that many times learning can seem very clinical, it can seem very removed, I think, and having something that is a direct experience that has some sort of human connection only reinforces and also makes that learning experience, I think, it's more of a learning experience, I think, than something where you're just memorizing something or you're reading about something and there is no correlation between what you're learning and what you're actually doing in your life. And so I think that, this is this type of learning is, I think it's hugely important, and it's one of the ways in which I think you can really reach students. So that's my a little bit about myself. So for today, what I really thought we could do, and I want this to be a dialogue. You all are the experts in terms of community engaged teaching and learning. I just want to sort of provide some food for thought, some experiences from my end, and then I really want this to be sort of a conversation and an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about either your experiences that you've already had in trying to translate something online that really is meant to be a face-to-face and an in-person and community-based experience, or also bringing into mind thinking about if any of you are planning for the fall. So before I continue, if people could just raise their hands, how many people have already had to put something online and have gone through that experience over the summer so far? Okay. And anyone who doesn't have their video on, you can also, there's a raise hand reaction that you can use as well. How many people are doing something in the fall? Okay, good. So we have a lot of examples and actual potential resources that we can talk about. So in terms of goal for this session, what I'd like to do is build upon the previous sessions, and in particular the one that Rose facilitated the last session. And I think that I want to do that through a lens of thinking about and directly head on humanizing how we're doing some of these things online. And I think, one of the things that can be easy to forget is that, when we think about human connection and we think about humanizing and we think about face-to-face, a lot of this we think about doing in person, right? We think that we have to be there, that we have to engage, and we have to sort of be physically in proximity. But I would argue that, or say that really, if you think about it, it's the emotional connection that we're building, right? So it's not so much that you have to be there in person with someone or face-to-face, but it's really about building some sort of emotional connection and building some shared experiences. And when we think about sort of how we're engaging in things in our personal life, so all of us at some point have connected with family or friends who are not in Charlottesville or who are in another location. And a lot of that connection is we're having to do it, online, or we're having to do it, and we've always done it by phone or by letter or by other types of communication. So in thinking about how you might translate that for your course that you might be thinking about in the fall, or thinking about how you might be wanting to get students sort of building that community together, you might think about sort of the things that you've done outside of teaching and learning and outside of the university, but actually in your personal lives, and how you've been connecting with family and friends. And sort of think about how those connections are continuing outside of being able to visit them in person. I think, three of the things, and these things were already touched on in previous sessions, but sometimes, we get so much thrown at us that it's easy to take information or share information out on the one hand and then forget it or sort of not remember it on the other. So I just want to bring back to the forefront that the themes of being authentic, being transparent, being honest, and having empathy, those are things that resonate with your students and with community partners, as well as with family and friends. And those particular themes are different. When you think about how you might show those emotions or be transparent in the classroom or with students or community partners versus your family and friends. But it's the same sort of concept, and it evokes the same kind of emotions and feelings. And so I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to share my screen. I didn't realize how many windows I had open, so and let me know if you can't see my screen. So you can read these. I'm going to just kind of read through them, and then I thought, you know, we could take a moment and we could talk a little bit about some of the individual situations any of you who are looking to the fall might be in. So how can we make the learning space as human as possible given our current constraints? And, you know, there are a lot of constraints, right? It's not just that we've had to quickly pivot and put things online. That is one of, you know, many constraints that we're operating under. So this goes back to the theme of having that human connection, your presence, empathy, and awareness. That's going to be more important than ever. And students really, you know, if you think about it, some of them are going through the same kinds of issues that many folks in our community are going through. And so thinking through how we can also make sure that we're being sort of empathetic and aware of what's going on for them as well, and you know, sharing that same empathy and awareness for yourselves. As a part of that, how do we give students a sense of ownership and control? Because a lot of what we're facing, you know, and I'm using the royal we, but you know, you as trying to think about how to do translate a community engaged course online, but at the same time, you know, students are also in this with you, right? And so this is a theme which has come up in previous sessions, but involving them in the process is part of that humanizing the experience, when really, you know, it's easy for people, students in particular, or for us to sort of feel a little bit removed because it's not in person, right? And so how do we get past that and give students a sense, a stake? So following along that, what can we do to give students an opportunity to bring their lives, understandings, and experiences to the course? And this is something that you know, normally happens with community engaged learning, but in this particular moment, because there are so many experiences and compounding factors, it's more important than ever. And then this is a theme, I think, which Rose and others have touched on, but how are our community partners being affected? And this is something, you know, Ellen, when you were talking at the beginning of this session, I was thinking about our community partners have a lot of pressures and a lot of challenges that they're facing. And so what can we do? How can we communicate with them? How can we think about their needs, and how can we help them? And also do that in the framework of the lessons and the course objectives that we're trying to maybe develop together with our students. So in thinking through that, how do we balance those community partner needs with student needs, and then our own expectations? So those expectations that we, you know, normally in the course of what we do, they seem very reasonable, and they seem, you know, like something that would completely make sense and be easy. But in the middle of a pandemic where, you know, we are constrained both physically and we're emotionally being challenged all the time. Maybe those expectations are not as realistic. And then this is something, Andy, you have said, and I think, Rose, Bonnie, others have echoed, but, we're operating in a new world. We're operating in a new paradigm right now. And we also have to give ourselves the same kind of empathy and be awareness that we're, going to try to give our students and our community partners. And really, so in terms of instructional design, I will say that just like with any other course that you design, when you design a course specifically for online teaching and learning, sometimes it takes, the whole summer. Sometimes it takes months, and it might involve, expertise from 2 or 3 other people who help you design, some of the components online and through media. And so this, in this new world where you are trying to take something that, you've been doing face-to-face and quickly transition it into a online experience, that remote learning, it's not the same process. And it is certainly not fair to think that you're going to be able to excel at replicating all of that in an online environment. And so thinking through what are the most important components, how do you maintain that human connection, and maybe reframing what are the most important components, and what are the things that really matter the most, and focusing on those and sort of redesigning what you are hoping that students and community partners come out of this experience with, and doing that, in sort of a realistic way. So I'm going to stop here for a moment, and I am going to ask for a very for a volunteer who has something that they're looking at for the fall, and maybe would be willing to share it, and we could, as a group, maybe talk through the course objectives and sort of whether or not there are things that we through groupthink and expertise can help in terms of framing it for this sort of new reality. So I'm going to stop here for a moment. And anybody can share feedback or comments or thoughts around, this in a more, in a less, specific way, if they would like as well. And don't all speak at once.
So I had an experience. I mean, I'm adjuncting in the fall, so I don't have a secure position because it may be canceled. So I don't have a solid plan. I haven't started designing my course. But what I was thinking regarding your points is that even though we're working online, the idea of local still matters. And so I just wanted to throw that out because I actually just moved from New York. I was in New York for spring break and ended up staying up there. And I came back to Charlottesville on Monday, and it's like I actually got rocketed from one community to another, even though I'm just home. And so that experience of like being kind of accepted into the Charlottesville community and people kind of calling on me and expecting to interact with me has been very visceral. And I had the same experience as a participant in someone else's course where the person switched from doing this kind of Zoom format to webinar where no one saw each other. And I feel less connected as a participant and may not show up today. because of that. So I just wanted to throw out those sort of nuanced reactions to the experience of working online, because there is still a local. So as like I was thinking about as I designed possibly this course to, you know, share learning. I was thinking actually about sharing, like with the yoga thing, as opposed to training students. I teach the theory and practice of yoga, but in like history and philosophy, and also religious studies. So I was thinking of pairing students with some outside person to learn as learning partners, not as one person teach, the other person receive, but as two people who are learning together. So that's what came up for me.
I think that's a great idea. You know, one thing that people sometimes do in a very quick format that's, you know, and they do it in person. So I think doing this long term when we're not able to be face to face is a great strategy. It's called Think, Pair, Share. And you know, this is sort of a long version of that, which I think is and a teaching version of that, and that is a great, I think, idea. To your observation and experience about the way that students can sometimes feel alienated if they're not getting some sort of face-to-face, even, you know, through Zoom or whatever technology there is. I think that that's something that happens quite a bit. And it's something that, you know, having some sort of synchronous contact with students is important. The other thing around this, that's a strategy that people use, and I think is something that naturally happens, but it's harder when you're online, is building that student community. So helping students communicate with each other is much easier when there's an in-person, you know, class, or there's in-person interaction. Online, it's almost like you have to seed that in some way, because it's not going to very naturally happen with that online environment.
I just wanted to build on what both of you said there. Like, I love those ideas of local still being really important. And I was also trying to think about, if we are online in the fall, ways to redefine the meaning of local too, like that it's not just Charlottesville too. So at the end of last semester, I had to change some of my assignments. And one of the things we did was to look at how vulnerable communities were facing this pandemic in the students' local place. So just like, you know, I had a couple students in Charlottesville, but most were all over the country. So it's also a really interesting way to kind of think about local differently as well. But I also, like, on some of those other points you all were raising, I feel a lot of pressure in some ways, because my two courses will be first years. So if we're online, this will be their first, like, introduction to UVA and Charlottesville. But also, I think a lot of us have small classes too. And so I know from my students reporting last semester that, you know, a lot of the bigger courses they were in didn't have the synchronous component. They were watching recorded lectures. So I think there is, in some ways, either more of an opportunity or more of a pressure on those of us with small classes to kind of try to create that human aspect. And I had sort of two ideas about that too. Like, one was just using Esther as an example. The last two times we've convened, she's had these wonderful backgrounds and that have a story to them. So I was thinking about employing that. Like, I always have a background, but it doesn't necessarily have a story that pertains to my class in the way that hers pertains to the Spanish conversation classes she's teaching. So I thought that was like a great example that maybe we could all think about enacting and creating that human element. And the second thing that I did that probably a lot of you just did naturally was like that idea that Mira was talking about of making the human connection more intentional. So what I think a lot of times in the classroom is I see as wasted time, like when they come in, you know, having students sort of check in, like, what are your highs and lows, or just having them check in some way that's much more personal. I would have seen that as like a big waste of time in on like if we were face to face. But I think giving students, you know, even just like 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of the online classes really helped us with that sense of the human and the community. So I'll try to continue that.
And one question that comes to mind from what you just said, Kate, is how then do we transfer that to the human connection with the community partners, right? If we can find ways to intentionally do that with our own students, that personal touch is also so important to their experience with their community partners. How do we do that in an online environment? And that's a question I'm just putting out to the whole group.
I've given some thought to that, and I'm still grappling with it. I teach a course in the fall, Police Community Relations, Problems and Prospects. And a part of it, I really kind of require students to kind of engage in what I describe as these limited immersion excursions, where they draw upon all their senses to kind of get an appreciation for, like they might go to Charlottesville Night Out, which is a function hosted by a couple of different organizations, including the law enforcement community here within Albemarle County, police foundations and whatnot. But what they have to do, they have to observe, listen, sense, and write a paper based upon that. And they have other kind of immersion excursions too. But with COVID-19, everything is in limbo. So it will impact, I think, their appreciation for different lived experiences. So I've been thinking about how do I kind of come close to getting them to really appreciate the other. So I've been giving some thought to an oral history kind of assignment where they would have to, probably with my assistance, identify some folks who will be willing to share, you know, their past, and for them to kind of collect that kind of information, and it all kind of be around issues around police community relations. But of course, there's some challenges that I'm trying to work through. How do I prepare the students for that type of assignment, kind of get them trained a little bit. But also on the other side of the equation, the folks that might have very, very powerful stories to kind of share, they might be challenged when we think about digital literacy and some of the connections. So that's why I'm kind of working right now, trying to see if I could kind of possibly bridge those potential gaps. But the oral history project was something I was kind of thinking about.
Frank just said a really interesting chat. Could you share a little bit about those community builders, Frank, and how you can do that in an online environment?
Yeah, and I'm of course just learning how to do those for the online environment too. But for my in-person classes and the online classes, community builder can be something, we name it a community builder. So I actually name it, and this is what we're doing. And it can be very simple elements, you know, go around asking about where they are, or say something about the space where you are. Or it could be something in relation to last week. And what I particularly like doing is actually asking students to develop them once we've had a couple of classes, and have them then offer them. And it is tempting to see it as sort of taken away from the subject matter of the class, but I do think it is an actual part of the class. And it's important for a lot of reasons. It's important for, and what I'm teaching, because I am teaching, tends to always involve at least some part of consensus building, community building. How do you bring groups together? That it's a chance for them also to experiment, you know, with that. And it's okay if it's not the, you know, the most ideal. Actually, my students end up being more creative than I am in, you know, in the type of community builder that they might do. And it can be something, it could be something that just takes literally a couple minutes. And it could be something online. I've been, you know, just only doing this a little bit, but definitely been doing it in small groups, smaller breakout groups, to have people do that, because it just takes so long to do something else. Unless you just do a poll, and a poll can be something, you know, funny. How many people have animals in your house, or, you know, whatever the case might be, but just something that is not directly asking them what did you learn in this course, but that is saying community is important and how we relate to each other is important. And just because we're online or in person, you know, that doesn't matter.
And do you think about doing that with the community partners as well, some version of that?
If they're visiting the class, yeah, but most of the classes, I mean, there are definitely classes where my community partners are in the class, and I've taught classes where we actually had community partners throughout the whole class. If they are visiting and they're the start of the class, yeah, we would do that. Matter of fact, probably even more important to do that when they're there, so that people get to see them as people, not just as you know, an institutional representative.
You mean even online, even when they're virtually there?
Well, I've done so little of it online, but yes. Yeah.
That's the part that I mean, I know I'm struggling with, all of us are struggling with. How do we, that the human touch is so important with the community partners, how, you know, and Brian started to share some examples of what he does. How do you?
I could say one thing, because one thing I did that failed was to do, like, we had a panel of community partners once, and they were talking kind of technical, and one went on really long, and I realized I should have just asked them, tell us a story about this, you know, tell me a story about this, and make it more narrative than descriptive of the subject. Not that they can't talk about the subject too, but I think that's more engaging for people.
I wonder, and I'm just going to put this out there, the oral history is that's a wonderful idea. And finding a way to sort of archive them and save them and make them available, I think is, because that is giving voice to community, from the community, and having the students participate in that. And I'm wondering if there's my colleague over in Special Collections and Rare Books, I was wondering if there's maybe a connection there that we could explore. So I put that out there for the oral histories. But, and I think, Brian, that you probably have already thought about that. I think about StoryCorps and NPR and how they, you know, share those out. And it seems like the kind of thing that really, you know, giving voice to those who maybe haven't had, I mean, of course, you know, with their permission, as you were saying, but it just seems like such a great way to give voice. Frank, on the community builders, is this something that you, in an online environment, you might also make sort of more publicly out there?
I'm sorry, what do you mean in the online environment, make more public?
So if there were some sort of a blog or a, you know, in a way to share out with more than within the classroom.
I mean, am I willing to? I'm certainly glad to share the community builders, yeah, and I have picked them up from other people too.
Okay.
If that's what you mean, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to add to the notion of community builders. Those kind of come naturally to a foreign language class, because they can be used as warm-ups. You know, and you can work on a language structure that you're trying for students to learn. For example, Spanish needs subjunctive to express emotions or opinions or suggestions, right? So one thing that some of my colleagues have been doing is at the end or at the beginning of the class, have students express how they feel or what they miss, what they have lost, what they have learned. And I haven't actually done that so formally, but I've heard great stories about that. And there is technology that allows you to interact in an online environment doing those things, like Padlet. I don't even know. There is another one that generates kind of like clouds of words. So there is technology out there that in an online environment contributes to that notion of sharing a small story. I mean, I understand that in the language class, maybe we work more sometimes at the sentence level, because we're trying to get students to use the proper verb and the conjugation and all of that. But I think creatively also those could, you know, help build that sense of community within the class, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's meant to be shared outside. But I think, at least in my experience, the transition was somewhat successful because there was already a rapport and we had a sense of community. And we felt that we were all in there, you know, together. And I don't think I ever got so many thank yous for even students saying like the things that we don't see that you do, thank you for those, you know. But I think it's important, those little touches that humanize, and I agree with Frank that they take a few minutes, like an exit card of how you felt after the class. I do a lot of like short reflections and sharing, and those things I think that can be transferred to the online environment. And I think you have to build a community inside the class before you build a community with another community, you know, because I'm seeing right now like 4 of your faces. I'm not seeing them all so that I can see, you know, it's just hard to see even everyone, even in a small class, and I have 18 students. So I don't know, those are my 2 cents. The background pictures, I've been doing that all along, and I didn't ask my students to do it, but I would always pick a background that related to the topic of the class, and they were expecting my story. And what happened is that some students started showing up to class with their own backgrounds. And they were starting to show what their cities look like and what they were proud of their cities, and it was kind of like spontaneous, and it would just, you know, as you're coming in, but it did build a sense of online community that I thought it was important to even start thinking about an outside community, and especially if we're starting online, that's in that, you know, oral history is from the outside, but maybe an oral history of a classmate if the class is small, you know. So I don't know, I think we need to build that community of trust within our actual classroom environment, and then broaden that outside. That's some thoughts from comments that you guys have shared.
I really love this idea of have other people given thought to how are there specific ideas that some of you are playing around with about how you do that, how you then transfer that same community building process with your community partners, or how important is that to your classes? I mean, maybe I'm only speaking from my perspective. It's enormously important in Books Behind Bars. It's the core of Books Behind Bars. Without that intimacy and the relationships between the students and the incarcerated youth, a big piece of the class is missing. And I would imagine that goes for a lot of your classes, right? So how are you thinking about doing that with your community partners online, with the students' community partners?
Since nobody's saying anything, I'll say something. I'm planning to teach my community friends how to use Zoom meetings. And I would still invite those who we have physical contacts in the past, face-to-face contacts in the past first, before I expand to others that we haven't met I haven't met in person. I plan to do it this fall, and I hope this new way will work. I suppose they can use Zoom on their smartphone. So I'll send them the link and teach them how to use it. So that's what I plan to do. And our topics, I will be repeating my topics from that fall and spring. So it'll be a familiar topic for me to manage. So hopefully it wouldn't be so difficult. So.
I'm gonna throw this out there, and it's more of a food for thought. So there are a lot of things that the community partners are being faced with and being asked to do, and it might be that there are things that we might want them to do and engage with us in, and that might actually be more of a burden than it might be help in some cases. One thing that I will put out there, and it's not something that UVA library is doing, but the public libraries here, we've been in conversation with some of them, and one of the things that they've been doing is making internet access available for people in the community, because there are a large number of people who can't even get online right now. And part of that is, that's always been the case. But the other part of that is people lose their jobs and they're trying to figure out where to pay bills. Internet might not, food and some other security issues are gonna rise to the top. And I think Rose mentioned this in the earlier session with virtual volunteering on May 1st about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But one of the things in thinking about engaging with community partners maybe is what are their needs, and then how to engage, if possible, them at those points and helping them sort of meet some of those needs. So I'm going to stop here.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I had to take my dog outside, but what I just was reflecting on was in order to create a sense of community among the students before venturing out. What I've done before is to kind of randomly assign students to groups and switch it up a lot. But I feel like under these circumstances, it might be better to partner students for longer periods of time, like a third of the semester, and then switch. And then have them do a lot of activities together, and including writing and reflective activities, and really sharing their work with each other as a way to build bonds between smaller groups of students before sort of heading out to create bonds with other people.
Yeah, that's the model for Books Behind Bars. The students work in pairs all semester long, and then the pair of UVA students works at a table with the correctional center students, and that's their intimate community for the whole semester. And we do have some full group work, but what my experience was this semester after we transitioned online is that small group work and those relationships were critical. Really, really important, and they were the saving grace of all of this. That students already had those relationships in place; they could rely on their partner. So, Naomi, I think that's a really great idea that I think all of us can consider for all of our courses. Are there ways to create really smaller, intimate groups that are with one another, kind of subgroups that are with one another throughout the whole semester? Or even, in the same with their community partners, because that community that can get lost if you're only, with the larger group.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I'm just unmuting myself for a moment to let people know that I'm copying down what's in the chat. It will go into notes later on. So if you're scrambling to sort of retain some of this conversation, just know that it will be documented.
I am just putting some resources in here because I just noticed the time. And I'm having some issues with some links here, so apologies for the very long links.
While you're doing that, I just want to say something about some points that came up. You know, that little going back to you, Esther, that little detail, that little touch of the screen really shows that it's a great example of how it's very small things can be powerful community building tools. And you already got me thinking about, well, yeah, maybe have each student choose their own screen that really reflects something about them or their local or their town or what's important to them. And you can also do that with the community partners. It's a really fun, creative, easy way to build community. The other thing I wanted to reflect on is I've been doing some reading and some research around e-service learning, which is the fancy term that's given to what it is that we're doing now, community engaged teaching online. There's not a lot of material about this. There's only 2 books in the universe on that subject. There's a handful of articles, so it's a relatively new area. But one of the things that's come out of this research were really surprising to me. There were two things that and actually I guess this applies to all online learning, that the single greatest factor in the success of an online course, very surprising to me, is actually the persona that and the relationship that the professor has with the students. Right? We don't think about that a lot. I was very surprised to learn that. There's a lot of research that shows that how you relate to students, the persona that you create online, you know, like Esther's backdrop, or, you know, any kind of personal touch that you do to really invite students into a relationship with you as the instructor. Research has shown that that is actually the most impactful thing that you can do in an online environment. And then the second thing is the community that's created among the students themselves. And content comes third. It's a really important, was a real revelation to me. The presence of the instructor, the community that's created among the students, and this would include the community partner. And then the content came third. And there's nuances there that I'm alighting, but glossing over. But that was, for me, that was a real revelation, because I never would have imagined those things, especially the instructor persona, would have been so important.
And those things, that's absolutely also true for online learning in general. Forging a connection, the instructor being able to connect in distance learning, if they're able to do that and they're able to get students to connect with each other, it's a much more, the level of retention and the level of students actually continuing is much higher.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what Naomi said earlier, that there was a webinar that she chose that she just didn't want to be a part of. I don't remember the details, because she didn't feel that connection. So yeah, so it really, it does hit home that point that as we think about these courses, let's not get so lost in the online component. Let's not put that first. Let's figure out how we can use that technology to focus on what's most important, which is that connection between the instructor and the students among themselves. And in our cases, the community partners.
I'm sorry, I have to hop off. I have another meeting, but thank you all so much. This was really helpful.
I need to run too, but this was really great. I mean, these small details make a huge difference. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Mira, did you have some resources you wanted to share?
I just pasted them in the chat, so some of them are here. And I should also mention that I have 2 people in my division who have been working. Now, this is more of a just straight translating content onto, that has been face-to-face into an online environment. But they're working on a guide, and we should be getting something out so that people can refer to it. It'll be linked from the library site, and also will be out as part of the teaching continuity site that has been put out by the provost office. So I can also directly share that link with you, Andy, once we have that guide finalized.
Okay, and Ellen is helping to put together a Google Doc with all of these resources from all of the sessions, including today's. So we'll be able to share that with the whole group when we have those. So these are links that you just sent, Mira, am I understanding correctly? I'm not able to, oh, okay, I see. Okay, I gotcha. All right, awesome. Esther had to go. Anything else, Mira?
No, I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, the thing that you were saying, Andy, and the thing for everyone here to keep in mind is that you're actually, in doing community engaged teaching, you're actually ahead of the game. Like a lot of people who are trying to translate things that are face-to-face, you know, lectures and things that are really not experiential are it's so much more challenging because there's the human element there. The human element was the face-to-face. So in terms of, you know, having a successful transition, I think, to online or hybrid, I think trust the experiential part and you know, focus on how to connect with students. And I think the points, Andy, you made at the end, those are the critical ones, really, and that it's the actual, you know, minutia of every single component, you know, translating that's not the important part.
So maybe the whole framing of these sessions is not the unique challenges that we face, but the unique ways that we can get this right in ways that people who are more traditional teachers don't. I'm being a little bit facetious, but you turned on its head. The whole idea was, oh my God, we're experiential teachers, community engaged teachers. We have a unique set of challenges. How are we going to do this? But you turn that upside down and say, no, wait a minute. Actually, the fact that you're so focused on the experiential component is going to serve you particularly well in this new environment because you're already thinking about the things that other teachers haven't necessarily thought about, that human connection. So I like that way of reframing it positively. So in the fall, we'll revise the description to emphasize the positive rather than the negative. Like, we're all rock stars here and we can teach everyone. It's a little arrogant, but you know what I mean. We've got some unique insights that carry directly over into the online environment rather than looking at the online environment as such an awful obstacle to what we do.
Absolutely.
So thank you for.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andy, this is also a good
Goodbye, Brian.
To think about how other courses might think about integrating components of experiential learning.
In an online environment.
Yeah, in an online environment, because, you know, as there are going to be some courses that are, I think it's going to be a challenge for them and a struggle, and maybe having a bit more a touch of experiential learning in there would actually make it a more compelling course for students, you know.
That's a really intriguing idea. So maybe let's take the experiential learning insights and apply them directly to this world. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to think about that. We may be starting a movement here. Shu-Chen, what do you think about that? Can we start to teach everyone else based on our unique expertise of how to do it right online? Or is that just arrogant?
I think we have some basis to start doing that because we have experienced a lot of the things you need experience, really. And then if somebody could tell you what to avoid, then everything will be more efficient. From my point of view, as a language class instructor, what I care about is the student output. I go by if they can spontaneously respond to a question of mine. and that's the oral performance is the primary thing. The written test, even though I can't really see when they're doing it, but I can tell they didn't cheat because with the mistakes they have made with the written, they couldn't possibly have cheated. So I'm thinking as an instructor, if we are experienced, we know how to assess our students' success. Therefore, you just determine what's the learning goal. Backward design again, what CTE has been advising us to do. Backward design,
Yeah.
have your goal, and then how do you map out the path to that goal? Here, I agree with everybody saying we shouldn't be so focused on a physical community, because online is a community too. We are all in this together. We are learning from one another. I would say the worst part of online teaching is having to stare at a screen. Other than that, it seemed to have gone fine for the second half of the spring semester in terms of student learning, because they still give me, I have some students taking the standardized test, and especially my community engagement class, they all did fine with the third-party objective standardized test, not my own test. So I felt language-wise, they were still learning something, and it's coming from our heart. I mean, Andy, with your books behind bars, I know technically it's really so hard to do, right? Maybe one of these days you guys could overcome that part. But I'm feeling hopeful though that we will come out of this lockdown soon.
Well, you know what I did, Shuchen? I actually, and this is something I was going to suggest to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to make all these decisions ourselves. Mira
Right.
made this point at the beginning. I actually ask your current students, as I just did at the end of the semester. I said, hey, you guys, all right, let's imagine that this course is online from the beginning of the semester, all right?
Yep.
Would that work for you? What would the experience be like? I was going into that assuming they were all saying, no way, it's not going to work, there's no way. They said just the opposite. They said, no, actually, if we started these relationships online and we maintain the same sense of community and connection and private conversations, intimate conversations they have week after week, they said they still think it would be a really powerful course. So I was not expecting to hear that. And it just confirms what you just said, that we don't need to, you're right, online is a community. It can, and students are, maybe students are more comfortable with it than I am. Maybe that's the issue. I've just been projecting my own, fears onto them.
They complain to me about the eye strain as well, but it's because they have so many courses. They have 4 hours in a row in one day, or they have 16 credit hours per week. Of course, their eyes are tired too. So I would say they have similar problems. Maybe we have less because we don't have 16 contact hours like they do.
But what I'm saying is, even with the tired eyes, students right now would be hungry for community. So anything that we can do online to give their eyes a rest and give their hearts a nice pull, mm-hmm. by connecting them with people, I think that the tired eyes is because of all the reading, and professors now put everything, it's all writing and reading. And
tell me about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to think more creatively. What more, even Zoom videos are better than a ton of writing for them. Ellen, do you think we're onto something here? Do you think we can start a movement where we're actually turn all this on its head and say, hey, look, guys, we're actually not the marginal ones here. We can actually lead the forces in creating powerful learning experiences by drawing on our expertise as community engaged teachers that you need in an online environment.
I do think that there are a lot of sort of features that come standard in community engaged courses that absolutely lend themselves to community building. The one that's been circulating in my head during this conversation is how often engaged faculty rely on co-creation with their students, with kind of beginning a semester by saying, we're embarking on this relationship and this project. Even I, the faculty member, don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, we're going to power on through it, and we're going to keep talking with each other about how to tackle obstacles that come up.
May I mention one of the rubrics, actually 4 rubrics in Washington State's at TPA, it's a teacher licensure kind of submission application. So I read the language instructor for K-12 for Mandarin teachers, Mandarin Chinese teachers. One of them is student voice. They have 4 rubrics. It is, you are basically, yes, co-creating, and you guys figure out together what are the physical resources and the material resources, any kind of sources. And then the third part is students write their reflections on if they have met the goal they set out to reach in the first co-creation class, where instructor and students co-create learning goals, learning outcomes, learning process together. And in midway, they have students to write reflections on why do you think you have reached your goal and how did you do that and so forth. And then at the end, of course, then that's there's a some summary of what they have been through and if it was this journey was fulfilling. So it's Washington State is the unique state that has the 4 rubrics. And at the same time, I think I would suggest really for us to reduce group class time, to give students individual time for their group project, for whatever they do with the community servicing service project or communication project or interaction project, whatever they do. You know what I'm saying? Reduce.
Do you mean specifically on an online course or
yeah, even for online course, reduce the contact time, the group, entire group between instructor and students, between that, reduce that time and give students time. Yesterday, I was in the CTE's summer intensive class, design whatever that Dorothy had put together for us. And Rose Buckaloo, the sociology professor, was one of the major presenters. She has what, 5 days a week. She doesn't have in-class contact for two of the times. And that's what I have done since the outset in 2018 spring, when I began my first Thrive grant project. I cancel equivalent hours that students need to have when they were interviewing the community members. And it's only fair.
Yeah, there's definitely like an equity issue to keep in mind when making those decisions, that, you know, every hour you ask a student to volunteer or to do some kind of community work is an hour that they could have been working to earn money. So to kind of swap out those course hours for the community interaction, I mean, that's, that comes up often.
Yeah, well, and it also raises the question of what is the role then of those synchronous interactions? Like how are we using that time? Maybe we're not using the time on the right things. Maybe that's the opportunity to build the community, and to do kind of have people share feedback on their ongoing projects, but not content delivery. But that's, you know, we've always known that the content delivery is the least good use of time of classroom time. Right. But especially in an online environment, what you're making me think of, maybe we need to fundamentally rethink what the purpose of that group interaction is and how we're using that time.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I really don't think it meant, especially now that I feel when it's online, it's more taxing on our energy level. I think we need to give students more time. I plan to reduce content coverage this coming fall.
That's absolutely true, by the way. There's research out there that says especially Zoom and other types of online interactive environments are much more straining, both mentally and even physically, than being actually face to face, which is kind of counterintuitive. But
Yep. So I'm going to reduce my material coverage by at least one lesson. For instance, if I used to cover 8 lessons, now it's just 8 topics. Now it's just only 7 topics or 6 topics. That way, so go deeper rather than go wider. Go deeper with every experience rather than go being expansive about what students are exposed to.
So one of the ways I've heard that described is don't think about covering, think about uncovering.
Right.
Don't focus on covering the material, focus on uncovering.
Exactly.
You do a lot more with a lot less.
You know, I have to point out that Shu Chen is saying this as she volunteers another 17 minutes of her time to be on a call with us.
Oh, shoot. I have to go. I have an 11:30. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to participate in this. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the fall. And
well, thank you, Mira. That was great. And thank you so much for doing this today.
I really enjoyed it. And I hope, I hope that this, you mentioned it's going to continue in the fall. And I think it's great. I mean, this is community building.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things people have appreciated about it. So yeah, we'll figure out how we're going to do it in the fall. I'd like to get people actively involved. Like Shu Chen is going to definitely be one of our presenters. Thank you so much, Shu Chen, for volunteering, which I just volunteered you. That was a joke. About your ongoing. So yeah, I'd like to get people who are going through the experience to be sharing, and also have some kind of more theoretical reflection based on some short readings that we'll do. Assuming people will read they'll read like a 20 pages, right? In preparation, like once every 3 weeks for a conversation, or is that too much to ask?
I mean,
if it's a short article, like 15 pages.
15 pages, 20 pages.
Yeah.
I mean, I would, but I'm not a faculty member.
Yeah.
I think I have more free time.